Good morning. We'll start the meeting here in about 30 seconds or so. I'm giving Steve Baker a chance to sit down. He's not even paying attention, which is fine. I get it.
You did keep it going.
I like it. All right, I would now like to call the June 2nd, 2021 meeting of the State Board of Education to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Delosa.
Present.
Mr. Durham. Present. Dr. Ernest. Present and accounted for. Dr. Briggs. Present. Mr. Gassman. Present. Mr. Mapes. Here. Mr. Miller. Here. Ms. Moe.
Here.
Ms. Rensley.
Here.
Mr. Watts.
Here.
Dr. Denner.
Here. Okay, at this time, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the April 14th, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So a quick statement from the chair. First of all, Byron, thanks for the 30-second countdown. The accuracy is always good. In last week's weekly email, I took some time to reflect on the school year. And and I see many educators out here, which, by the way, it's so good to have you here. Welcome. But took some time just to look back. We had no roadmap when we started. And yet, I think over and over and over, our State Board of Education at these meetings and out and about publicly, we have tried to celebrate the successes that we saw in Indiana over the past school year. So a couple include, well, I'll list a few. The vast majority of our students were in school the entire school year, with the whole focus of keeping our educators and students safe. Many states did not see this and cannot congratulate you as educators who led the way on that. Secondly, many states said that they would struggle to administer federally required assessments. We applied for a waiver just to make sure. Dr. Flores and Lynn Schimmel are here, and they're going to tell a little bit more about this. So I won't take the glory from your presentation, but I do want to just acknowledge that Indiana produced completion rates that would rival any other school year at an average of 97%, which is absolutely incredible. Thirdly, while some throughout our country, and this is, all of us are in this boat, we know that we have a lot of work ahead of us, and how does that look moving forward? And so while we've seen some struggle about how accelerated learning might look, we have seen Indiana educators and community partners come together at a rate to which is incredible. And again, Jason Callahan is here and Ron Sandlin, and they will dig into that a bit more. And then finally, while some states struggle to maintain the school funding, the needed school funding, Indiana educators are working to find innovative, bold, sustainable ways to spend this funding, this federal funding, and also keeping our eye on our state funding that will also come in to, again, hopefully increase our teacher median foundational pay in Indiana. So I think, though, as we celebrate the successes, driving in this morning, I was kind of reflecting. And I do like to, I think we all do, like to pause and celebrate the successes, but we also have to acknowledge, and I think we all know this, the real and incredible work that we have ahead of us. Dr. Flores and Lynn are going to go into, again, some of what we're seeing with our early assessment data. I know as schools, we encourage multiple data points to determine the individual learning of a student. But just we as a board see it as a great opportunity, and we want to support that progress forward. And again, I can't say enough about how excited we are to have an audience today with you and many of our educators here. And the other thing I'll add is we know that we cannot do this work alone. Schools and educators, we are going to hustle. We're going to do everything we can, but we cannot do it alone. And I don't know how many people watch. I think we maybe have a viewership of 15. But for those 15 who are watching, I think as educators, we would love to see our parents and families across the state also know that we need you too. And a great, easy way for you to help your child is take 30 minutes to read to them or have them read each day. That is one of several ways that can really help, and it's an easy way. And then we also, again, our community partners. We need you as well for wraparound services, for learning-focused summer activities and after-school activities ahead. And we are eager as educators to work with you. So on that note, and I know that was a longer statement than usual, but we had a lot to celebrate and also a lot to look ahead to. So on that note, any board member comments or reports? Not yet. I think that'll come. Are you recusing from consent? Yep. Any public comments? All right. Let's move then to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So, second, and I will be recusing myself from consent item G.
Dr. Junior, I also will be recusing myself from item G.
Okay, so William Durham and BJ Watts, if we could note, they are both recusing from item G. Thank you for that. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like, once again, we got the formative assessment in here, and I would hope that we would continue to look to expand that, as I think it's too restrictive as a state agency. I think you ought to have local control, that school districts pick what they want and use those formative assessment dollars. M-Class isn't on there, which is one of our approved dyslexia instruments to identify dyslexia in our students, but yet we can't use formative assessment dollars to pay for that. I just think it's too restrictive right now, and we need to open it up even more. I know there's some statutory language that we have to follow, but we need to work with partners to allow them to get approved, and if not, find a way to waiver some of those. As the assessment we've used in Perry Township for 5 years that was predictive enough, even on this year I learned to be within 3 percentage points isn't an approval. And I think that you can hold me accountable with the test, but get out of my way and let me use what I want to use as far as how to work with our kids and identify where they need extra support from our teachers.
Thank you, Superintendent Mapes. Noted, for sure, with an exclamation point. Thank you. I also want to take a moment and note we do have an item on here, the Coalition of Continuous Improvement Districts, and looking out, I do see a few superintendents. Tara Bishop from Perry Central in the south, Paul Ketchum from Batesville, and Matt Prosecki from Decatur Township are all here, and it's good to see you on their behalf. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Excuse me. Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Runchler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Dr. Jenner?
Yes.
Thank you. And I've noted the recusals as well.
So moving on to new business, HEA 1003 flexibility waivers. I think the recommendation from staff is to walk through those separately this time. Is that the case? Or would you rather?
If that's what the board would like, prepared to go either way. Could walk through them one by one.
Okay.
We're gonna walk through them one by one and vote on them as a group.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
So Chad, thank you. Chad, why don't you start with Culver Community School Corporation?
Yeah, so up first is Culver Community School Corporation. They've asked for a waiver from the 180 instructional day requirement in order to count the instructional year by minutes rather than hours. The recommendation there is to grant. Again, this has been granted a number of times. This is a one-year request for the 2021-2022 school year. Next up is Triton School Corporation. They make the exact same request as Culver Community Schools. The recommendation is to grant as well. MSD of Lawrence Township has requested that the board grant a waiver from the requirement that they establish a virtual education school, as they have passed the threshold in statute necessary to do so. I will point out in the past the recommendation has been to deny that particular request. However, with COVID and changes in the way we are gathering information and reporting, that is no longer necessary, and so staff has recommended that the board grant that particular waiver request as well. Fourth is Frontier School Corporation. They have requested a waiver from the 180-day requirement in order to count the school year in minutes rather than instructional hours. The recommendation is to grant. And then Lewis Cass Schools has made the exact same request in order to count the school year by minutes rather than hours. And again, the recommendation is to grant. So if there are any questions on that, I'm happy to go further. But
Thank you, Chad.
Just for clarification, they are attending 180 days. That just the number of hours in those days is where they get flexibility.
So they are attending the equivalent of 180 days worth of minutes. So it's rather than having to be constrained by a 5-hour day or a 6-hour day in order to count towards, they will make up the equivalent number of minutes of instruction that would otherwise be provided in a 180-day school year. And I will note, in every instance, the school corporation actually offers more than the required minimum number of minutes. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I am going to also recuse on this one from item A3, please.
So BJ Watts, A3
Dr. Jenner,
recusal.
I'll be recusing A3 as well.
William Durham, an A3 recusal as well. Okay, thank
And I have
you.
noted both of those.
Okay, any other discussion? So with a motion and a second, Chad, can you call the roll?
Sure. Ms. DeLosa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Runchler,
Yes.
Mr. Watts,
Yes.
and Dr. Jenner.
Yes.
Recommendations pass 11-0. With respect to the two with recusals, 9-0. Thank you. We'll inform the schools.
Thank you. We'll now move to discussion. So Dr. Flores, Lynn Schimmel, Ron Sandlin, and Jason Callahan.
Good morning, board. So I wanted to start today just to reflect on some observations that we've seen over the course of the 2021 school year, and most specifically related to our spring assessments. One thing that I think we wanted to thoughtfully articulate to the field as we engaged in the assessments this year was this: with the allowance of flexibility from accountability, we had really an administration that allows for us to fully measure student performance without some of the stakes that are typically associated with assessment. So many of our communication efforts that started very early on, we actually started communicating about spring assessments in July. So very early on, we wanted to be in the forefront of really articulating the value of the assessment data and ultimately maintaining validity and reliability. And Lynn's going to speak a little bit this morning about some of those specific considerations as we implemented the assessment, but we really wanted to ensure that the assessments were reflective of student performance this year. So, as Dr. Jenner mentioned, we were very fortunate to have very high participation rates. Again, we have several schools that were fully in person, and so that allowed for us to really meet and exceed some of those expectations. So for ISTEP, WIDA Access, iRead3, and ILEARN, we exceeded that 95% threshold. Another point that we're excited to share is all of our assessments this year deployed as expected. That's not to say that there weren't some individual challenges. Anytime you're delivering an assessment with technology, there can always be some little hiccups, but in general, we had a very successful assessment administration. As we were planning and moving forward with the spring administration, again, around the January, February timeframe, we had some requests to extend WIDA and ISTEP, and those requests were accommodated just to allow us to have that additional data coming in. I am going to hand it over to Lynn to share some additional information, and just by means of an introduction, Lynn joined our team in January, so she came in straight from the field, from Westfield. She's been great to add to our team, especially in terms of assessment implementation, having come from a local corporation, so we're excited to have her on our team.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
All summative assessments, so state and federal assessments, were given in person. No remote options were given as an opportunity. So beginning last summer, we started notifying schools of this in-person assessment that would be taking place. In order to do that, we did allow some flexibilities. Schools were able to submit assessment plans if those assessment plans deviated from years prior. So for example, we widened the pool of test administrators who could give the assessments. So typically non-certified staff serve as proctors. They don't hold instructional license usually, such as a teaching license or a social worker license or an administration license. And so we offered the opportunity for those non-certified staff to be certified as test administrators if they had the same training as all the certified staff. So they went through test security, test administration, and accommodations training. Then they were able to give the assessments, widening the pool, offering smaller group sizes, possibly one-on-one, alternate settings, flexible schedules, bringing students in and out, helping to accommodate the social distancing, and also bringing in virtual learners. As you can see from the table, and Dr. Flores mentioned it, our participation rates were outstanding. Schools did an amazing job bringing in students to participate in the assessments, meeting and exceeding many other states, as we've sat in on meetings and heard about their successes. These strong participation rates are giving our educators strong information about the mastery level of Indiana academic standards for their students, and so that they can create strategic learning plans for their students for the immediate use this summer, next school year, and into the future. We encourage educators to use not only this summative data, but also their formative assessment data, their interim assessment data, and their classroom data to create those strategic plans and embed progress monitoring within, so that as students are reaching and meeting those grade level expectations, those plans can be revised.
Question. Will we continue that flexibility of being able to take our non-certified employees and let them go through the training to expand the pool of people who can administer the test?
I think with the administration and some of the successes that we've seen in allowing this flexibility, that's something that we definitely can continue to reevaluate. I think in light of COVID, we've had to kind of extend some of the boundaries that we've typically considered. And I think one of the things that we keep in the forefront of our minds is really trying to ensure the validity of the assessment. So as long as the validity can be maintained with the flexibility that's allowed, I think that's something that we'll definitely consider going forward.
That's something I hope we do. I mean, we have a large EL population, and you can do smaller groups, and you can really meet the needs of kids. It was something that, find something positive out of the pandemic. I think this is something a state agency can do to help schools.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pat. I think it's a prime example of the flexibility and removing of barriers that COVID provided. We're learning some things that we need to keep. So, good question.
To that point, Kate, because this was going to be a question I was going to ask, not in the same way, but on day 4, why I keep track of this, I don't know, but we're on day 450 of the pandemic, in case anybody wanted to know. And I get on these calls with the feds, and they always want to know. They're like, Byron, what day is it of the pandemic? So now I really do have to keep track because people ask. But is there, and you've mentioned some things here, is there going to be sometime a conversation about what are the things we've learned? And because we have these one-off things, but I still believe there have been so many, and this is not minimalizing the terrible things that have happened in the last 450 days, right? But we also know some good things have happened, right? And we talk about those things. Are we going to, and I know I'm off topic and into a rabbit, but I'm not, because it applies here, right? Are we going to have that larger conversation at some point? And are people tracking, like Charity, do you have, somehow I think you probably do, knowing you, do you have a list of the things that this worked? I know Pat does, right? But these are the things that, and if we don't, could we and can we have that? I think that would be exciting, right? Because I do think, when I'm looking out here at friends that are finally back here now, I think they would have things to tell us. That hey, this worked and this has been improved. Sorry.
Well, can we set up a portal that people could submit good practices or efficiencies across the state, at things that they thought worked that they want to continue because they found it because of what we went through?
That would be good.
Yeah, if we don't learn from this, we've really screwed up. Who was it that said we've wasted a crisis or whatever? But we have, right? Because I think we've done some things have really happened that were cool in the midst of a lot of things that weren't. So. And
I think you pointed to it. I think our local leaders are no doubt creating that list at the state level. We absolutely have a list, and sometimes we find ourselves even thinking, okay, so based on what we've learned, are we turning the Titanic around, or in some cases are we rebuilding it based on what we've learned?
Or just rearranging chairs.
Or I guess you could say it that way. So no doubt, Byron, a lot of opportunity to learn and improve and not go back in some cases. So good question, good point.
I could see Persecki really getting into that, right? Keeping track of all of that, right?
And the best practices and the efficiency idea, we absolutely need to continue putting some thought there. So appreciate that. And the other thing to that point is we get a lot of calls. It's interesting, and this won't be surprising to many of you, from superintendents and school leaders who just want a safe place, or even teachers, right? Like educators who just want a safe place to brainstorm some ideas, talk efficiencies, understand what they could learn from others across the state. So appreciate that idea, question.
So in terms of reviewing ILEARN data, I did want to share that we are in the stage right now where the results that are being released to schools and corporations and parents are considered preliminary. We are in the midst right now of the rescore window, so parents are engaging with school administrators to request rescore, and we intend to share the results with State Board at the July meeting. We did communicate more broadly recently, however, as we're beginning to receive results at the state level and to be fully transparent as others are engaging in these conversations locally, that we are starting to understand the potential impacts of the 2021 school year. So again, these are preliminary kind of characterizations, and so I'm not going to go into specifics today. But in general, we are seeing a small dip in English language arts. And for those of you that have followed some formative and interim data, that falls in line with some of those early indications from those providers as well. There is a more significant decline in mathematics. And so one of the things that we've tried to be mindful about in the recent weeks as we've had this observation is, again, to signal that more publicly to ensure that schools and corporations are really digging into the data that they have to determine if these trends that we're observing are what they're seeing locally. And as they're moving into accelerated learning plans for summer and fall, or potentially throughout the next school year, that they're very mindful of where these potential challenges may be as they're thinking about instructional course loads or specific types of supports for students. So in the coming months, we really will have a multi-phased approach. Again, one of the things that we tried to define very early on was a research-based initiative to really best understand some of what the data would be showing us about state performance. And again, I want to make sure that it's clearly noted that our learning loss initiative is really focused at the state level, but some of these same ideas can be taken on locally, and local school corporations right now have access to this data as well to start reviewing and analyzing and determine their specific needs.
I'm going to interrupt. I want to make certain we just don't look at this as learning loss, because a lot of it is information that has not yet been presented to kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were on a hybrid schedule in Marion County from August until April. Kids are coming to school 2 days a week. They don't have a loss. We haven't had the opportunity to introduce information to them. So as we look at this data, yeah, it's going to look really bad. Mm-hmm. But let us, it's not going to be summer and fall. It's going to be summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, before we probably catch some kids up. Mm-hmm. And so I want us to always to keep that in mind, because loss just sounds like we did a terrible job. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we didn't do a terrible job. The things that we were able to instruct on, our kids get. Or we have great teachers, great administrators leading buildings that will get there. Mm-hmm. But it is a gap that is created by information that has not yet been presented to our students.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. So in the coming months, we will be evaluating the potential impacts academically of COVID-19. And one of the things that we have the benefit to do is we have data sharing agreements with some of our formative providers. So for the first time, we're actually going to be including the formative and interim data in some of the analysis going forward, instead of just using ILEARN or WIDA Access as an example. Another benefit that we'll have as we proceed is through many of the data initiatives on Dr. Keller's team, we have been creating systems by which schools can give us a lot more information and data. So through our analysis and research, we are going to be looking as well how potential attendance or modes of instruction have relationships to some of that overall performance that we're observing. And for this spring, before we turn the corner to what's coming, we have deployed several resources from the department to accelerate learning, to support some of these conversations that are going on locally. One of the things that we established, again, very early on, is really trying to be a thought partner and creating some research-based resources that could inform some thoughtful next steps as others are engaging in accelerated learning. So some of our key audiences were partnerships with community organizations and how they can establish some relationships with schools and corporations. We also provided some protocols to really dig into assessment. So for those that may not have expertise in that area or may not have dedicated staff to data analysis, that they would have some systems to leverage. And then we also stood up our accelerated learning website. In April, to coincide with our iRead 3 results going out, we also delivered a remediation toolkit as schools were planning for the iRead 3 summer administration. And in May, we really targeted those key next steps as we started to receive the ILEARN data, which is analyze, plan, and execute. So that's really the message that we're driving forward with schools and corporations right now. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Jason.
Thank you, Charity and Lynn. Good morning, board, Dr. Jenner. It's truly an honor to be here. I think I have a unique perspective because I began this pandemic in the field as a superintendent, and now I have an opportunity to serve my colleagues from the state level. Today I'm going to talk about accelerated learning. Dr. Flores discussed this a little bit from some of the work that she and her division are doing. As we talk about accelerated learning, I would like everybody to think about a couple of different things. One is, as Dr. Jenner and I were speaking with superintendents about how they were using their formulaic ESSER funds, a superintendent said they saw these funds as an opportunity to restart the heart of education and change things systematically. We talk a lot internally about return on investment and how are we going to use these funds to have systematic and sustainable change in the field. And so I really like this concept of cultural change, restarting the heart. The other part is, and I think Dr. Mapes, you spoke on this a little bit, but Damian Betterbiner from the National Center of Assessment, who's doing our accelerated learning study instead of learning loss study, said, a lot of these losses, learning losses, had been occurring well before the pandemic, right? We know that from the field, that we have students that suffer learning loss from summer to summer or come into school systems behind already. And so he said he hoped that this study would really shine the light, be a flashlight in the dark of learning loss or learning that had not occurred yet, that had been going on for some time. And so excited to change that narrative and really shine that light on this. After I get done talking, Mr. Sandlin is going to talk a little bit about House Bill 1008 and how at a state level we're funding. We had 4 general principles guiding us when we talk about discretion, or our ESSER funds, our formulaic funds, and our discretionary funds, and that was accelerate learning, supporting our educators, sustainable innovation, technology, and infrastructure. And so we helped try to guide the field and really focusing on these areas to restart the heart. Again, as the Assistant Secretary of Student Pathways, I'm looking a lot at college and career, and so in addition to the foundational learning that Charity talked a little bit about, we're also looking at internships, apprenticeships, things that did not or were not able to occur due to the pandemic, and lost opportunities when we think about employability skills and post-secondary competencies. As part of Dr. Jenner's administration, We talk a lot about breaking down silos and working with interagencies, and one of these partnerships is with the Commission and also with the Governor's Workforce Cabinet as we look to, again, reimagine summer school. And two of the initiatives we have are Crossing the Finish Line and Bridging the Gap. Crossing the Finish Line is a partnership with CHE and Ivy Tech and Vincennes. And what we're trying to do is to increase educational outcomes for all students. And so we're looking at the Indiana College Core, technical certifications, and CGs offered by Vincennes University. And so what we've tried to do is identify students using our higher ed partners in CHE and also our K-12 partners, students who are very close to earning those credentials, but are just not there. And so hence Crossing the Finish Line. These are students who are probably 3 to 9 credit hours away from receiving these credentials. And as I pointed out from Dr. Betta Benner's comment, we're hoping to shine a light on the importance of these credentials and credential completion, and not just random acts of dual credit. And so I just spoke with Rebecca Rashalti right before this, and we are at 1,300 students that we've identified that are taking part in Crossing the Finish Line. So that's 1,300 more students that will have an opportunity to complete a post-secondary credential before they leave K-12 and go on to higher ed or the workforce. In addition to that, Bridging the Gap is really expanding, again, some of those foundational skills, some of those ensuring students are college ready before they walk onto campuses this fall. And so, again, with Ivy Tech, we are providing free coursework to these students. We're incentivizing them to be a part of the program. We know that Ivy Tech 111 is a very important class for future success, and so that is part of this work. And so again, like I said, these are some great opportunities. I think some board members had commented there's some good things going on. I think this is one of those examples where we're taking a bad situation and creating an opportunity out of a challenge. So looking forward to a lot of success. I believe these are programs that we're going to continue on well into the future beyond coming out of a pandemic as well. And so with that, I open to questions or turn it over to Mr. Sandlin.
I'm busy today, so I would ask whether or not as you're going through this, if you're going to also look at graduation requirements and the number of credits and the number of courses, as we've talked in here a year and a half ago or so, that we've got to look at what we're doing at the high school level and the courses they take and free up that flexibility for those kids to do those internships instead of continue with the path that we have and locking kids in to really still a college prep program.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to figure out a way that after the core 24 classes when they're freshmen and sophomores, to get them in that pathway to either go into the workforce, into college, or into the service.
Yeah.
And that's going to take some thinking from the department and bring it to us to make a recommendation to the legislature to change the credits that are required and the courses that are required in order to get a kid to the finish line.
So Pat, and I know Jason, you probably want to chime in too. You know, we have the opportunity to impact students for 13 years, and you just hit on, excuse me, as a state, how might we best set up students for success where every child upon graduation knows if they're going to employ, enroll, enlist. And a couple, if you follow Twitter, I do some, but I've seen some schools tweet about their career signing days, for example, where they're standing. We just talked about this at Evansville. I was up in Garrett High School. They just had a career signing day. I think I don't want to misstate the school district, but there's another school coming to the top of my mind who they are standing with their employer, already with the connection there for a high wage opportunity. In many cases, the student has training that the employer is going to help them get to go, and then and then the enlistment, and then the enrollment, of course, and really being as intentional as we can. And the 13 years we have students, I so appreciate that point. And the intentionality has to, we have to look at that backwards design and any barriers that right now may be causing us to not be able to fully support our students. Jason, add on. Yeah, feel welcome to.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, as Dr. Jenner said, I mean, these are conversations we're having a lot. We're talking through accountability. We came back and said, accountability is really how we're measuring. Well, to your point, is the what. What does that look like? And I think we believe a lot in identity of students being able to identify with their career and then being help them guide along the way. So I agree 100%. I think as you're thinking about, Indiana College Core is maybe most aligned with that 4-year pursuit. The TCs, the CGs are more career-based. I think the importance of TCs and CGs are their credentials earned. So even if they're going directly into the workforce, they have something of currency. If they're going to transfer to another part of the state or so forth, they have that currency in addition to that career. So, point well taken.
And I would be remiss to also say Kevin Teasley's also in the room, who's leading that up in Lake County. He brought some students down to. It's your school, Erica. I apologize. Yours, Erica as well. My goodness. So The value of the intentionality at that high school space, and how can we do everything possible to support our schools and leaders to clear the brush and get the work done for kids. So anyway, as I'm looking across faces, we better end this or I'm going to start calling out other people in the room.
I do have one comment if I could. I do want to see this become a focus for us, because there's no greater gift we can give students in the gift of time. And right now, as Pat alluded to, they don't have that. So not only does that capstone give them an opportunity to create relationships that may end in a high wage job, it also helps them figure out what they don't want to do. And higher ed's expensive. So let's make sure that our kiddos, as they're going into higher ed, going into the workforce, they understand, hey, I know I want to be an accountant. I know I want to do this. I've had this experience. I know this is what I want to do. So I don't get to year 3 of IU and I owe $80,000. And at that point, I can't really change my mind. I got to get my degree and start paying this stuff back. So those capstones, but that gift of time is so huge. And as we look to scale youth apprenticeship, call we were on last week together. I mean, as we look to scale models like that, that truly is a partnership between the industry and K-12 schools, that gift of time has to happen or we can't scale it. I mean, there's not time for kids to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think giving them back to the point of the career, like giving them that identity, they're going to be more driven to get that work done as well. And so, but you're right. While we have them, let's maximize that time.
Thank you. I think we could talk about this all day long. All of a sudden, we have an 8-hour meeting on this topic. But on that note, thank you, Jason Callahan, and all your work. And Ron Sandlin.
Thank you, Dr. Jenner. A quick update on House Enrolled Act 1008, which created the Student Learning Recovery Grant program in the state of Indiana. Mr. Callahan mentioned it briefly. It's really the state's investment in our response to the impact of COVID-19 and disruptions to student learning opportunities over the past 15 months. The state invested $150 million in deploying resources across the state to directly support students most impacted by the pandemic. And first and foremost, I want to point out and make it clear that we greatly appreciate the trust and support of the Indiana General Assembly, and recognize and take the responsibility to effectively administer the $150 million that the department received. We take that responsibility very seriously, and some of the information I shared today will hopefully reflect that. So the law actually carved out the eligible entities for the grants. You can see them on the screen: community-based organizations, education service centers, institutions of higher ed, private, not-for-profit, for-profit organizations. And then school corporations, charter schools, and non-public schools could receive them with a caveat around they needed to spend their federal COVID relief funds that were given to them for the similar purpose first before they could expend 1008 funds. And I will say this, we worked closely with school corporations to make sure that high-quality programs, they were able to fulfill that legal requirement, but also still receive support for really high-quality programs. And one thing that the department really encouraged and actually built into the rubric was collaboration. One thing that we do know, and the research bears out time and again, high-dose tutoring, small groups, one-on-one, is really effective, but it's even more effective when the entity providing the tutoring is working in lockstep and hand-in-hand with the school corporation or with other entities that engage with that child in other aspects of their life. So we really promoted and scored and funded applications that presented meaningful collaboration across organizations within a community, or even in some instances across the state of Indiana. We have a few statewide applications as well. So the program was launched April 22nd. That's when the legislature signed it into law. The governor signed it a week later, but the department didn't wait. We got to work. And with the Herculean effort of the Department of Education staff, led by Scott Jaworski, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out Scott's dedication and tireless work and long hours to get this program administered and out. We were able to award grants in just a little over a month. And we were able to award grants that are high quality, that are defensible, and that we strongly believe will lead to meaningful, measurable outcomes for children. And that is something that I think is a testament to Dr. Jenner's leadership, as well as the team that we have at the department. And so we issued 110 unique awards. Included in those 110 awards are 350 unique partners to illustrate the collaboration that we encourage. At least 83 of the 92 counties, students in 83 of the 92 counties here in Indiana will be receiving support. And we say at least because in some instances the education service centers serve multiple counties. We might not have captured every single one. And the last thing I'll say, just to illustrate the responsibility with which we approach this program, while we awarded $122 million of the $150 million, that was after a comprehensive review of the awarded budgets. And so we went back through every single budget that was approved, and we reduced those by $20 million, just over $20 million, in an effort to ensure that every single dollar that's going through this program is directly supporting students in a community, and also that we're trying to create some level of comparability and equity across the state so that, again, the awards are defensible based on how many students they're going to serve. These recipients will provide support in literacy, math, and college and career readiness, supporting students' social emotional well-being throughout to ensure that they receive what they need in addition to the great work of our educators in schools, the additional support they need to recover from the impact of the pandemic. And as you can see, it includes tutoring, professional development for teachers, after-school programming, and other enhanced learning opportunities. And most importantly, next steps, and we are committed, this is going back to our responsibility to effectively and responsibly administer this program. We are committed to working with all of the grant recipients over the next year or 2 years, depending on if they have a 1-year or multi-year grant, to track and measure progress and actually pull out data to be able to tell the story of the impact of these funds. The remaining funds, the approximately $25 million that we have remaining, will be awarded at a later date. So these funds aren't being used to administer the program or anything like that. We just want to make sure that we can run a second round, take lessons learned, and invest in even more high-quality programs throughout the state, and potentially prioritize areas that were missed out in the first round. So with that, questions about the program can be sent to the email on the screen. It's a specialized email for the program, communitylearninggrant@doe.in.gov. But for each of you, I am here in the flesh to answer any questions that you may have directly.
Ron, no question yet, but just hearing you run through what happened in the last 30 or 45 days, that's super, super, super impressive, especially with a 7-week-old now, is that correct?
Well, I'll tell this right now. I'm just the face, and I'll tell you, and we need to question whoever made that decision as well. The work was really done by the team behind, behind me, behind this suit, specifically Jason Callahan and Scott Jaworski, who really just carried the lion's share of what needed to get done to get this across the line. So thank you.
Go ahead, BJ.
I know you don't always get to hear it, but I mean, job well done. I mean, the fact that you've impacted students in every single corner of this state, and I know what undertaking that would have been to dole those dollars out and make sure we do it responsibly. So, good job.
Good job. I think, thank you for the kind words. As I was sitting here listening, our schools and communities, also notably, to your point, BJ, when you pointed that out, I mean, 350, my eyes twitching saying this, 350 unique partners that schools have developed in that short time period. Now, some relationships were already there. They just were further activated. Others I know, because I've talked to some of you, were on the phone trying to work with your community partners and schools hand in hand. So I cannot emphasize enough, as a department and as a state board of ed, we want to do everything we can, to the earlier points mentioned, to clear the brush, because we know the real change and the real activation happens at the local level every single time. And and to that note, and we've said this before, and we'll continue to do that, we will be highlighting successes on repeat. As we learn lessons from COVID, and as we look forward, we will be highlighting what is working, and we'll also be real about lessons we've learned and what's not working, and how we're going to have to shift in a different direction for the purpose of kids and impacting as many students as we can. So, Ron, I know you have dark circles under your eyes, so do I. I just have stuff to cover it. But you and your team, Scott, Jason, Lynn, Charity, others, just can't thank you enough as well. And our school leaders. A lot of opportunity ahead when we work together. It's kind of amazing. All right, on that note, does anybody else have anything to add there?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Aye.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye.